Hi guys, this is Hyunmin Max, aka the King of Eye Test. Welcome back to another video on the channel. I'm the expert in your tactics and formations due to the sheer number of Premier League games that I watch. So are you actually behind in your mini league right now and you need some differentials? We have a few players here who can do really well for you, who are very lowly owned for you to make up ground on your friends. So as usual, right, the graphics in this video is done by my guy Inverts. You can check him out in the description down below. He does really fantastic graphics at a very reasonable price, so do check him out. Different content creators, right, have different definitions for differentials. So for me, a differential is a player whereby he is owned by 15% and below of the game. It's actually considered a differential for me. Of course, we have your casuals and people who are a little bit more enthusiastic about the game, like yourself, who is actually watching the video right now. So a player might be highly owned overall, but very little experts or serious players, right, actually own that player. So 15% and below is the criteria. First player that I actually want to talk about is Odsonne Edouard. I believe that he has massively, right, flown under the radar. Nobody has been talking about him. 3 goals in 4 games. Now last season, right, he was actually a rotation risk because he shared a lot of minutes and starts with Mateta. This season, he has started all 4 games, right? Played mostly 90 minutes except in Gameweek 3, whereby he only played 70. Now, he is in very good form and probably will be the player to finish off the chances, right, created by Eze. He has some pretty good games upcoming in terms of Aston Villa in Gameweek 5 and Fulham in Gameweek 6. As you guys can see, this is actually taken from Fantasy Football Scout. Fulham, right, actually have the worst defense with 12.11 XG conceded. So I can very well see him getting a haul against Fulham, especially if Paulinia, right, doesn't play again. So he does also have a Forest in Game Week 8 as well. I'm probably going to bench him in Game Week 9 against Newcastle, seeing that Newcastle is, the top 6 defense in the game. So other than that, I'll play him in the remaining fixtures. So for context, right, he was actually really prolific for Celtic when he played for them. 87 goals and 38 assists in 179 games. Of course, you can say that the Scottish Premiership is nowhere near the level of the Prem. But I've been watching Palace's games and he actually looks really sharp this season compared to last season. And with his place safe for now in terms of being rotated, right, he has the room to go and express himself without too much pressure of getting, hooked at the 60-minute mark, which was what happened very often last season. So if you are looking to move off a João Pedro, a Jackson, a 4.5 mil non-playing striker, you can consider Odsonne Edouard, who is actually only owned by 2.4%, right, of the player base. Next player that I actually want to talk about is Cameron Archer. This guy is actually a proven goal scorer in the championship. 7 goals in 20 games for Preston North End in 2022. 11 goals in 20 games for Borough, right, also in the championship in 2023. Now, out of all the 5 strikers, right, that Sheffield United have, I would say that Archer is the one that seems most likely to score. McBurney is more of a workhorse, right? Osula is more of a target man. Your finisher in that team is actually Cameron Archer, and I've been watching him. His shooting is really accurate. In the game against Everton, right, he actually only took 3 shots, scored 2, right? Of course, the second shot was really lucky because it actually hit the post before rebounding back off Pickford, right, for own goal. But, as they say, you make your own luck. He does have some pretty tough games upcoming. Like I mentioned, right, Newcastle have a top 6 kind of a defense. And then we have the likes of West Ham, who's actually on a really good run. Fulham, of course, is actually the fixture to target. United and Arsenal, tough games, right, again. So for me, right, he only costs like 4.5 mil. And he should be the last attacker, right, that you should call up off your bench. At this stage of the game, right, you should have 5 really good midfielders along with 2 really good strikers. So you would really only play him, right, just in case of an injury. If you're looking to move off a João Pedro or a 4.5 mil non-playing striker like Woodrow or Mubamba, right, you can consider Archer, who is now, right, owned only by 5.3% of the game. This is perhaps, right, my favorite pick out of all the differentials, right, Diaby. This guy is absolutely electric. One of those players, right, who kind of seems quicker with the ball than without the ball. Gets the crowd off the seats, with his lightning pace and dribbling. He's listed as a midfielder, but he actually plays, right, just off Watkins. Doesn't really play off the wings. So other than Watkins, right, he is the next player that I think is actually the closest to go in the Villa team. He kind of reminds me of Adama Traore, but with way more end product. Now Villa, right, actually have a very nice run of games, I would say, from game week 7 onwards. We all know that Brighton is a good team, but if we actually take a look, right, they have like the 4th worst defense in the league overall. They do concede lots of goals and lots of chances to other teams. So I think that, you know, Brighton is a fixture that we can target. And after that, he actually has really nice games, right, in Wolves, West Ham, and Luton. So again, as you guys can see, Wolves and Luton, right, are among the top, 7 or 8 worst defenses in the league. So I expect Aston Villa to score plenty of goals within the next 5 game weeks. Unai Emery, right, seems to have found a way that makes Villa very dangerous going forward. And for me, right, they are this season's dark horses alongside Brighton and Spurs. So at the start of the season, I was actually debating, right, going between Watkins and Diaby, because we all know, or we all assume, right, that based on last season, right, Watkins is a 90 minutes man. But if you do actually look at the number of minutes that Watkins has played this season, right, he has actually got subbed off around the 70th minute mark in game weeks 2 and game week 4. Now for Diaby himself, right, he got subbed out at the 63 minute marks in game week 2 and 72 minute mark in game week 3. So there isn't that big of a difference between the two in terms of number of minutes that they play. Of course, right, Watkins will start most of the games, while Diaby would probably play somewhere along the lines of 4 out of the next 5 games. So we have to consider that as well. We now also know that Watkins is no longer on penalties, so that's another thing. Diaby, right, it's also like 1.4 mil cheaper than Watkins, which means that you can reinvest that money elsewhere. So if I were able to choose again right now and I'm on a wild card, I'll probably go Diaby over Watkins, despite there being, way more good midfielders to choose from compared to forwards, right? That slot is actually very limited. But Diaby, right, is actually really explosive for me. In 172 games for Bayern Leverkusen, right, he actually has 49 goals and 48 assists, which is an attacking return, right, every 2 games, so that is fantastic. I know that we all have the Bundesliga tags, but if you actually watch this guy play, right, he's absolutely, right, the real deal. If you want to make up big points in your mini league, for me, right, Diaby is the kind of player, right, that can help you cut the gap, right, between you and your friends. Now, the next player that I want to talk about is our hat-trick hero, Evan Ferguson. Highly touted, right, as the next 100M player from Brighton. Still only 18. He did score 6 goals in 10 starts for Brighton in the Premier League last season. He's also being monitored by Man United as we speak. So all this just goes to show that this guy is super talented. So for me, right, it seems like a straight fight between him and Welbeck for that number 9 spot. João Pedro is more often seen as a number 10. And also, right, Welbeck can also play as a number 10 as well. But for Ferguson, he can only play as a number 9, which I think is actually an advantage for him. We all know that the Serbi said that João Pedro needs more time to get used to Brighton's style of play. So when everyone is fit, João Pedro will most likely start on the bench. So that leaves Welbeck and Ferguson. So for now, right, Welbeck is out with a muscle injury. I don't think he will make the next game against Man United. He might return against Bournemouth. Now, last season, right, was one of the few times, right, where Danny Welbeck managed to stay fit. Started 21 league games, but if you're a long-time watcher of the Premier League, well, we all know that Welbeck has always struggled to stay fit for an extended period of time. And when Europe starts, right, I'm quite sure that Welbeck won't play 2 games in 1 week, which will mean that Ferguson, right, should have more game time. It's worth noting, however, that Ferguson is also still very young. So my guess is the manager probably wants to prevent him from burning out by playing too many games. And of course, we do know that for a fact that the master of rotation in the Premier League is the Serbi and not Pep. So expect Ferguson, right, to play like 6 to 7 out of the next 10 games. And don't be surprised, right, to see him on the bench. So right now, he's actually currently flagged with a knee injury. 75% chance of playing. He didn't join the Northern Ireland national team, but I think he will be fine and come back against Man United. So for 6 mil, right, you can actually do a lot worse. So really, if you actually want to take a look at the fixtures itself, right, let me take a look at Brighton. So they do actually have a very nice run of games, right, coming up, starting from, I would say, game week 10 onwards, whereby they're actually going to start to play the likes of Fulham, Everton, Sheffield United, and Forest. That is when the fixtures turn really, really well for Brighton. So probably if you don't want to go in for him right now, right, because of the tough run of games he has coming up, maybe you can target him in game week 10 alongside Mitoma. So the next player for me is actually a must buy. He is actually Udogi. So his price is now up at 4.6 mil, currently owned by 14.4% of the game. For me, he is very attacking, like Estupinan and Chilwell. So even if Spurs don't keep a clean sheet, he's very likely, right, to get an attacking return for you. I mentioned numerous times how good Spurs are going forward, and Udogi is actually a huge part of that. Always in and around that penalty box, which is all you can ask for a fullback. So I see potentially, right, a big haul against Sheffield United. I would probably bench him against Arsenal, but I would definitely play him against Liverpool because Liverpool's defense is not exactly the greatest, and I think that he can actually get some attacking returns there. Luton, Fulham are all really good games, and he actually has Palace, right, in game week 10. So if you can't own both Maddison and Son because you have no slots in your midfield, why not buy Udogi, right, who plays like an attacker for Spurs? If you're looking to move off a Saliba, Luke Shaw, for me, right, Udogi is the number one defender right now you should go for, simply because of the attacking potential he has and how good Spurs look. And not to mention the fact that he's actually very cheap, only at 4.6 mil. So probably, one of the most overlooked players this season is actually Awoni. He has returned in all his 4 games so far, despite already playing Arsenal, United, and Chelsea, right, with 3 goals and 1 assist. Going back to last season, he actually had a really good run, right? 6 goals and 1 assist in the last 11 games. So he's actually on a very good run of form. He seems to relish the bigger games as well, right? He did score against Chelsea, Arsenal, and Liverpool last season as well. I read somewhere that he actually has the 4th highest expected points per minute in the league as well. Number 1 striker up at Forest with Wood as a backup, with the likes of Morgan Gibbs-White supplying him the ammunition, right? He could do very well. He also has some really nice fixtures coming up, right? Burnley, Palace, and Luton, right, are all games where I expect Awoni to score. He's somebody, right, you can buy and leave in your team without having to transfer out unless he gets injured. He has also proven, right, that he's kind of fixture proof, right? Scores and assists regularly against the big teams like I already mentioned. So if you're looking to move off a João Pedro, right, upgrading your 4.5 mil striker, there is no better option than Awoni. He's also, right, only owned by 4.5% of the game, which makes him a huge differential. So don't sleep on Awoni. The next player that I actually want to talk about is Live Foster. We now know for a fact that Burnley has a double game week in game week 7 itself, which could mean potentially more attacking return for him. So I think for me, Burnley is a more attacking team than Luton, having watched both of the teams. Burnley, however, right, they do have the tougher games against Newcastle, while Luton has Everton. But for me, right, attackers are more fixture-proof than defenders and goalkeepers. So if the game is tough, right, it's very unlikely for that team to keep a clean sheet, but their attackers, right, can still score. Now, Company, right, has actually set his team up in a very attacking manner. He's been trying to emulate, Pep Guardiola with the high lines and, seizing the game by the scruff of the neck. He even did that against City and Spurs, which tells me, right, he will attack no matter who the opposition is, because that was actually how he got Burnley promoted. Now, he does have some really tough games against the likes of Man United and Chelsea. But for me, right, at 5 mil, right, he's probably going to be the last attacker you call upon. So he can probably sit out those tougher games. You don't have to necessarily move him out after the double game week 7. The fact that he's only being owned by 0.7% of the game, right, means that he's massively overlooked, because I can tell that most experts, right, are talking about Morris, simply because of the fact that Luton has the easier double game week. If I had to choose between Morris and Foster, Foster is the guy for me. Now, of course, we can't go a video, right, without talking about our guy, Son. He's now owned by 11.4% of the game, which means that he's actually still a very big differential. I don't really see him in a lot of experts' team. There's a high chance, right, that he actually hauls in his next game against Sheffield United, and thereafter you have Arsenal and Liverpool. Like I mentioned, I think the Arsenal game might be a little bit tight, but we all know that Liverpool, right, loves to play a high line, and I think Son, right, would most definitely exploit that space in behind with his pace. So there's going to be goals in that Liverpool game. That's why I like Son, despite it being a difficult fixture. Of course, it all depends on whether he stays as the central striker. When he was playing out on the left, he was actually too wide out. right? Even Udogi is further forward. As the central striker, right, there's no doubt that he has better goals and assist potential there. I think, right, he will get at least the next 3 to 4 games at striker. We now do know for a fact that Richarlison, right, has said that he need to seek psychological help because he's actually going a very tough time off the pitch. He mentioned something along the lines of people being around him just for his money, and now he actually wants to perform better on the pitch. He did play for Brazil, right, in both games, but he didn't score. So for me, right, even if he does play, I expect Richarlison to start off the left and Son through the middle. Do remember that when Richarlison first started out at Watford and Everton, right, he was actually more of a left winger than a striker. So I would say him playing as striker is kind of out of position. He's actually best off the left in my personal opinion. So if you're actually not going to captain Haaland in game week 8, where Man City needs to play Arsenal, you can consider Son against Luton Town in game week 8. So even in game week 9, he's actually a really, really good option where he faced Fulham at home, which, like I already mentioned previously, Fulham has the worst defense in the league. So definitely a better option than Man City against Brighton in game week 9, right? So that is something that you can consider. So I know that Salah is not exactly a differential given that he's being owned by 25.8% of the game overall. But if you look around the experts team, right, really only 1 in 10 have Salah in their team. So the majority of the 25% are casuals who actually own him. So he is an example of a highly owned player overall, but very little experts or engaged players, right, actually have him. That's the reason why he's included in this video. We now know for a fact that he's definitely staying at least until January before the Saudis try again for him, so we don't have to worry about that. Salah has also been very professional throughout the transfer window. So even though he wanted to join the Saudis, right, his training, his on the pitch performance wasn't really impacted. He didn't throw any tantrums as well. Now Liverpool, right, has a really, really nice run of games coming up. The only tougher games offensively for Salah, right, is actually Spurs over the next 6 game weeks. So you can seriously consider Salah if you're not going to captain Haaland again, right? Like I mentioned in game week 8. So let's take a look at Haaland's fixtures. He actually has tougher games, especially in that game week 8, 9 and 10 window. I'm definitely 100% not gonna captain Haaland against Arsenal in game week 8. It's an away game as well. Arsenal always seems to, get the better of Man City, or at least it's always usually a tight game. So I'm definitely looking for other options in game week 8. Game week 9 against Brighton at home is probably a better fixture. And again, when we go back to game week 10 against Man United away, it might not be as easy as it seems. And if we actually take a look at Mo Salah, definitely Everton away in game week 9 and Forest in game week 10, right, looks way better compared to Brighton and Man United. So if you're somebody who's potentially going to go against Haaland, right, in game week 8 to 10, right, Salah is actually a very, very good player to go for. And if you actually choose him as your captain, between game week 8 and 10, you can actually make up a very, very big points gap there. We all know for a fact that Salah will start almost every game. He's on penalties, and Liverpool, quite simply, right, is just fantastic going forward, and I really, really want a part of that attack. Another reason why I really like Salah is because we don't know who Klopp will start with in the other 2 attacking positions. He has Gakpo, Nunes, Luis Diaz, and Diego Jota to choose from. Now, another thing to make it more complicated is the fact that Darwin Nunes was actually hauled off at halftime, right, in Uruguay's game against Ecuador due to some muscle injuries. And he actually didn't sustain that injury in the game itself. He actually arrived, right, to join up with Uruguay with that problem. So this might mean for me that Liverpool, right, don't actually risk him in the game against Wolves. At least not from the very start. He might actually come off the bench. We all know for a fact that Salah is a very, very fit player. Rarely gets an injury, and his body, right, can actually sustain the rigors of a 50 to 60 game season. We have already seen that. Another reason why I think Salah is actually a very, very good option. My guess is probably, right, that Gakpo, right, and Luis Diaz, right, will probably be the other 2 attackers that start for the games against Wolves. So once again, the graphics here is done by my guy Inverts. Do check him out. He's actually a really nice dude. Does graphics for a really reasonable price. I will also be doing a deadline stream, right, at 7 PM UK time on Friday. That's tomorrow. I'm going to be trying out a few different time slots to see which one works best. So you can join me live there and I'll answer all your questions as to who to buy, who to sell, who to captain. All the good stuff will be there. If you guys actually do enjoy the video, do hit that like button. And of course, do subscribe for more FPL content. And that's all from me and I'm out. Alright, take care guys.